Somewhere in your family tree, thousands of generations back, someone ate a person. Not in a war, not out of madness, at dinner. And the strange part, that person probably didn't think they were doing anything wrong. Stay with me here, because this isn't some cheap shock fact. This is the start of one of the strangest mysteries in human history. Because here's the question nobody asks. If eating other humans was once normal, what actually stopped it? It wasn't morality. Morality came later. It wasn't disgust. Disgust came later too. It wasn't even some sudden religious rule. Something else happened first. Something almost nobody talks about. And once you understand what it was, you will never look at human history the same way again. So let's go back, way back, to the moment our ancestors were still deciding what counts as food and what counts as family. Picture this. You're standing in a cave 60,000 years ago. The fire is dying. Outside, it's freezing. Someone in your group just died. Not killed, just died. Old age, sickness, an accident. Now here's the question. What do you do with the body? Today, the answer feels obvious. You bury it. You mourn it. You would never imagine doing anything else. But here's where it gets strange. For a huge stretch of human history, in many parts of the world, the answer to that question was, you eat it. Not because people were monsters, not because they were starving. In many documented cases, there was plenty of other food around. That should stop you for a second, because if hunger isn't the reason, then what is? This is where the mystery actually begins. Anthropologists have a name for eating human flesh, cannibalism, but that word makes you picture something savage, something evil, something other. The real story is far stranger than that. Because in dozens of human cultures across thousands of years, eating the dead wasn't seen as horrifying. It was seen as love. Let that sit for a second. In parts of the Amazon, in parts of Papua New Guinea, in parts of ancient Europe, eating a dead relative wasn't an act of violence. It was an act of devotion, a way of saying, I don't want to lose you completely. I want you to become part of me. That would be true, except it gets even weirder because cannibalism wasn't just about love. In other places, it was about war. In others, it was about fear. In others, it was about status. 4 completely different reasons. One single act. So now the real question isn't, why did ancient humans eat each other? The real question is, why did something so common, so widespread, so deeply woven into human behavior suddenly stop? And the answer is not what you think. Here's where things get scientific. And brace yourself, because the evidence is older and stranger than most people realize. In 1899, in a cave in Croatia called Krapina, researchers found something disturbing. Human bones, over 100,000 years old, with cut marks. Not random marks, precise marks. The same kind of marks you'd find on animal bones that had been butchered for meat. At first, scientists assumed it was ritual, a burial practice, something symbolic. But here's the twist. The cut marks matched exactly where you'd cut to remove muscle. The bones were cracked open in the exact spots you'd crack them to get to the marrow. This wasn't symbolism. This was nutrition, and Krapina isn't alone. In Guff's Cave in England, scientists found human skulls that had been turned into cups, drinking vessels, carefully shaped, carefully smoothed, dated back over 14,000 years. Now, here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. This wasn't one isolated tribe doing something strange in one cave. Evidence of human cannibalism has now been found on nearly every continent. Different time periods, different climates, different cultures that never made contact with each other, which means this wasn't a weird local custom. This was something built into early human survival itself. But that's only part of the story, because not all cannibalism was about hunger. Researchers eventually split it into different categories, and once you hear them, you'll start to see this mystery has way more layers than you expected. There's survival cannibalism, when starvation leaves no other option. There's ritual cannibalism, eating a loved one's body to honor them, sometimes even believing it transferred their strength or spirit. There's warfare cannibalism, eating an enemy not for nutrition, but to humiliate them, to declare total dominance, to send a message stronger than any sentence ever could. 3 completely different psychological worlds, same act. And here's where the real twist comes in. The same human brain capable of deep love, deep loyalty, deep grief, was also capable of this. Not because early humans were broken, but because for most of human history, the line between person and resource was not where we draw it today. That line had to be built. And the moment it started being built is the moment everything changed. Okay, here's where most people get the story completely wrong. You'd think the reason cannibalism faded away is simple. Humans got smarter, more civilized, more compassionate. Slow moral progress, like climbing a staircase. But here's where it gets weird. That's not what the evidence shows. The real reason is much deeper and far more uncomfortable. It wasn't morality that ended cannibalism first, it was disease. Here's the mechanism. When you eat the brain tissue of another human, you can contract something called prion diseases. The most famous case comes from Papua New Guinea, where a group called the Fori people practiced ritual cannibalism as a sign of respect for the dead. They believed eating a relative's brain kept that person's spirit and strength alive in the family. But something was riding along with that ritual, a misfolded protein, a prion. It caused a disease called kuru. Victims lost control of their muscles. They began to shake uncontrollably. Eventually, they couldn't walk, couldn't speak, couldn't swallow. It was horrifying to watch, and it was always fatal. And here's the part that connects everything. This is eerily similar to mad cow disease, which decades later spread through cattle that were fed the remains of other cattle. Same mechanism, same warning sign. Nature has a rule, and the rule is brutal in its simplicity. Eating your own species is a biological trap, because the closer the genetic relationship between predator and prey, the easier it is for diseases to jump straight across with no resistance built up. A lion eating a zebra faces one set of risks. A human eating a human faces almost none of nature's usual safety buffers. There's another layer to this too. Scientists who study predator behavior point out something simple but powerful. A lion doesn't have health insurance. Every meal carries risk, and evolution doesn't reward tasty. It rewards safe enough to survive long enough to reproduce. Cannibalism in the long run was not safe enough. So slowly, across thousands of generations, a brutal filter went to work. Groups that practiced cannibalism more often were quietly more likely to get sick, weaken, and die out. Groups that avoided it tended to survive longer. This wasn't a moral choice happening in real time. This was natural selection, working in silence. Over thousands of years, punishing the behavior biologically before anyone understood why. But here's the bigger twist. Biology didn't finish the job alone. Something else had to take over, something that could spread the lesson faster than evolution ever could. Imagine you're a parent in a small tribe 12,000 years ago. Your child gets sick, shaking, losing control of their body. The only thing you can connect it to is the funeral feast from a few weeks earlier. You don't have microscopes, you don't have germ theory, but you have something just as powerful, pattern recognition. And here's where the story shifts from biology to something far more human. Once tribes began noticing, even vaguely, that eating human flesh led to sickness and death, a new force entered the picture: culture. Tribes began building taboos, warnings passed down, wrapped in spiritual language because that's what people understood. The spirits are angry. This curse follows those who eat their own. Underneath the mythology was something startlingly practical, a survival rule disguised as a moral law. And here's where it gets fascinating. Once a taboo becomes sacred, it spreads faster than any science ever could. You don't need data. You just need fear, repetition, and authority. Religious systems across the world, independently, with zero contact with each other, arrived at the same conclusion. The human body is sacred. It is not meat. But notice the order of events here, because this flips the whole story upside down. We assume morality came first and behavior followed. The evidence says the opposite. Survival pressure came first, disease came first, pattern recognition came first. Morality was built on top of biology, like a building built on a foundation nobody could see anymore. And once that foundation was in place, the taboo stopped being about disease entirely. It became about identity. To be human, in the deepest sense, started to mean a being that does not eat its own kind. That's strange to sit with. The most human value we have was born from biology trying to protect itself. Here's where everything connects. We imagine our values, compassion, dignity, the sacredness of life, as things born from deep wisdom, philosophy, religion. But this story shows something stranger. Some of our deepest moral instincts may have started as biological alarm bells. Disease avoidance, dressed in sacred language, repeated for so long it stopped feeling like a rule and started feeling like truth. Researchers have found this same pattern across cultures. Disgust toward decay, toward bodily fluids, toward certain foods, functions as ancient survival software, later wrapped in moral meaning so people would actually obey it. Disgust came first. Morality is a story we tell afterward, to explain a feeling whose origin we've forgotten. Once you see this, it's everywhere. Why does almost every culture have an incest taboo, biology, dressed in moral language? Why is rotten meat universally disgusting, even to children who were never taught? Pathogen avoidance, dressed as instinct. Why does eating human flesh trigger such visceral horror in nearly everyone, even now? Because that horror was the mechanism, not the side effect, the actual tool evolution used to keep us alive. You don't feel disgust because it's wrong in some cosmic sense. You feel it because far back in your ancestry, people who felt that disgust survived. and people who didn't often didn't. That feeling in your gut right now, not random. A transmitted survival signal, thousands of generations deep, still firing inside you today. And here's the part that should shift how you see human history. This wasn't morality defeating instinct. This was instinct slowly, quietly becoming morality. So why did ancient humans stop eating each other? Not because someone decided it was wrong, because biology punished it first, because disease made it dangerous, because pattern recognition turned danger into taboo, because taboo turned into sacred law, because sacred law became the foundation of what it means to be human at all. It took disease, fear, ritual, and tens of thousands of years just to build the wall that now separates person from meal in your mind. A wall so deep, so automatic, you never knew it was built. You assumed it was just natural, just how humans are, but nothing about human behavior is just natural. Everything that feels obvious today was once an open question. Real people had to live through, suffer through, and answer with their bodies before anyone could answer it with words. So next time something feels like an unshakable moral truth, it's worth asking the same question we just asked about cannibalism. Is this wisdom, or is it just a very old fear wearing the costume of a moral law so convincingly that after 100,000 years, even we forgot it was ever anything else?